This is Daniel Palulis, and I'm going to be going over CAC 3200 Chapter 5, which is debugging. And so we're going to go over throwing exceptions, the debugger tool, and also Android lint. So let's start by working on some exceptions. So if we go to mainActivity.kt, we can comment out the binding line, and we'll expect this to immediately crash our code because that means that we haven't actually initialized our view binding. And so if I run the code, let it build. So we can see that it's going to launch the app, then immediately crash. And I can try to run it again, and I think we should get a actual error this time. Yeah, so it says GeoQuiz keeps stopping. But we expect that because we commented out binding, so there's no actual binding for it to reference because we're not actually initializing it. But if we go to Logcat, we can actually see the data behind this exception. So let's just expand this out. And I'll set this tag to Android runtime, because this is a runtime exception. And we can see all this red is saying that there's been an exception in main. And the way that the log works is it starts at the most recent call in the stack and goes down the stack until it reaches the actual call that led to the exception. So here we can see that mainActivity.kt at line 23, and we can click that. And so up here it's showing that we're trying to access binding, and we haven't initialized binding. And we can see in the exception that it says Kotlin uninitialized property access exception. So that tells us that there's been an issue where we haven't actually initialized the binding variable. And so now if I were to just go here and comment it back in and try to run it again, it runs, and we can check Logcat and see that there's been no exceptions on launch. So this is one type of bug where we're actually hitting an exception and the app won't be able to actually run if we have that bug in the code. But sometimes we have bugs that just cause misbehavior but don't actually crash our code. And so we're going to look at that now. So if I go to quizviewmodel.kt and I comment out the line that increments our current index, then I run the code, we'll see that if I try to click next, nothing happens. We stay in the same question, right? So we may want to figure out how to log that error without knowing exactly where it is. So if I can add this line of code right here and move to next, log.d with the tag that we set in Chapter 3, Quiz View Model, and just say updating questions text. And I can actually throw an exception here so that we can see in Logcat when we reach this line of code. So we're logging an exception into Logcat. And so if I run again, and let's also pull up Logcat. So everything looks fine in Logcat so far, but as soon as I try to press next, we should get a, oh, I gotta get rid of my tag. So if I run the app, pull up Logcat, change my tag to Quiz View Model, and then I notice that there's nothing yet is coming up because this is a runtime error. So we'd have to actually cause the event to occur in order to have the exception come up. So as soon as I press next, we'll see that we have this log for updating question text, and we're throwing this Java lang exception. And again, we can navigate through the stack all the way down to where this log is being called, which is quizviewmodel.kt at line 30. And we can see that, oh, we're not incrementing current index, so we need to fix that. And of course, if I go ahead and comment that line back in and run the code, we can easily navigate through all the questions.